Hi, today I will talk about the negotiator in Chinese culture. This is the contents for 4 parts. For the first part is introduction. In China, negotiation is not just a transaction exchange, but a strategic and relationship-oriented process, deeply influenced by Confucian values, connectivism, high-context communication, and Guanxi relationship. We explore the influence of Chinese culture on negotiations, analyzing key factors such as relationship building, communication methods, decision-making styles, and conflict management from the perspectives of large culture, small culture, and convergence. The second part is the negotiation culture. We will talk about cross-cultural action plan 1, how does Chinese culture affect negotiations? I analyze the impact of Chinese culture on negotiations from multiple perspectives, including both small and large cultures. First, problem establishment and negotiation initiation. Information provision and acquisition. Progressive information sharing. Chinese negotiators usually do not disclose all key information in the early stages of negotiations, but tend to gather strategic information through indirect meanings gradually. For example, Chinese negotiators often use social situations and even casual conversations during dinner parties to test the other party's bottom line or true intentions before formal negotiations. About high-context communication. Not every Chinese negotiator is the same. Although China is often seen as a high-context culture that emphasizes indirect communication, in some small culture, such as young entrepreneurs in advanced cities, we may meet someone who uses very direct or even Western-style communication. On the contrary, some small cultures formed in state-owned enterprises or local government systems still retain a strong sense of face culture and hierarchy. Then we will talk about the establish a negotiation relationship. Relationship Guanxi is crucial but not a universal template. In the early stage of negotiations, Chinese negotiators will pay more attention to establishing personal relationships. However, the degree of dependence on Guanxi varies among different small cultures. In some efficiency-oriented private companies, performance and contracts may be more important than personal relationships. But in heavily regulated industries such as medical devices and real estate, Guanxi remains crucial. Second, about negotiation process exploration. Discussion and suggestions on plan. Win-win mentality. The negotiation goal of Chinese negotiators is not just to obtain maximal benefits, but to seek opportunities for long-term cooperation between both parties. Solutions typically require taking into account the interests of all stakeholders. Acceptance methods for feedback and suggestions. Avoid public denial. Due to the face culture in Chinese large culture, Chinese negotiators do not like to directly reject or criticize each other's proposals in public. Doubts may be expressed through questioning such as, is there a better alternative to this plan? Third is about negotiation between both parties. Concessions and decision-making style. Concessions are gradual. Chinese negotiators usually do not give a cheap bottom price at the first quotation, but gradually approach the final result through multiple rounds of negotiations. The decision-making style is not fixed. In large culture and some small culture formed by traditional enterprises or administrative units, decisions are still made by senior management. But in new economic industries, such as the internet and cross-border e-commerce, negotiators usually have more real power and adopting negotiation decision-making. And about conflict management, avoiding direct conflict may not be the most suitable approach. Chinese large culture tends to avoid direct conflict, but the culture formed among young entrepreneurs or overseas student communities encourages open discussion of differences and quick adjustment of plans. The third part is negotiation efficiency. We will talk about the cross-cultural action plan 2, how to negotiate more effectively with Chinese negotiators. We should avoid cultural stereotypes, make sure of convergence, and shape the overall negotiation atmosphere based on the large culture, and develop flexible and varied strategies in combination with the specific requirements brought by the small culture. First, communication methods adapted to Chinese culture. Respect the guanxi and catch small cultural habits. Before negotiations, try to establish contact through formal introductions or mutual acquaintance as much as possible to gain higher trust. For example, a business dinner can be arranged to establish a relationship between the negotiating parties in a relaxed environment. At the same time, we should pay more attention to the small cultural habits of the other party's industry or company. Second, handling concessions and decision-making in negotiations. Consider the concessions and decision-making style within the industry or enterprise. When discussing specific topics, it is important to show respect for traditional Chinese etiquette and indirect communication, while also considering the decision-making style within the other party's industry or company. For example, if the internal culture of the other company is more open, a straightforward discussion approach can be adopted appropriately. If the other party is more conservative, a more indirect expression should be used. Third is conflict management. We should combine large culture and small culture for conflict management. If the other party is a conservative Chinese negotiator, we should avoid directly denying and using indirect expressions. If the other party is a team composed of young or overseas students, we can have an open discussion directly. Fourth, we will talk about how Chinese negotiators face cultural differences and how they should do. First, they should enhance cultural awareness. From national culture to small culture, try to understand the organizational culture, industrial culture, and the other characteristics of others. Second, they can use cultural convergence strategies, determine acceptable mixed cultural communication methods for both parties before negotiations. And cultivate cultural intelligence is useful. Cultural intelligence is helpful to understand the differences in negotiation style among different cultures and adjust the language and etiquette based on the negotiating partners. The final part is conclusion. The trait of cultural convergence is becoming increasingly evident, and in cross-cultural negotiations, Chinese negotiator and the other party should pay attention to the interaction between large and small cultures. When facing cultural differences, both parties should avoid stereotypes, have the ability to recognize each other's cultural context, and flexibly adjust communication strategies. Okay, these references I used in the presentations. That's all my presentations. Thank you.